understanding crash data query results. So creating that custom column list, you can click on preferences there. You can go in there and you can change your column list. You can name the list and create new, and then it can be whatever you would like it to be in there. Once the custom list is created in preferences, a pop-up of data elements is you can choose it from, and again, whatever you want to do, and you can choose your elements and then save it, and then it'll be available in that drop-down list for you every single time. Crash data query results. You can do a couple different things from just this results page. So once you have it back, you can refine the location, you can summarize the data, or you could show a crash map. Let's go through the refine location. So prior to DT4000, when most folks are using the Tracks location tool, the MV4000 had the ability to kind of free type the on and at street information. So sometimes the highways and street names kind of get all over the place here. So you can even see on this page here, you have 012, which is just Highway 12. So you could have it as 012, you could have it as 12, you could have it as 12 East, 12 West, and again, it kind of gets all over the place a little bit. So if you want to refine the location, you want to make sure that you are selecting, search or select the highway or street names, and then you add it over to that column, and then you're going to refine it based on that. You can exclude crashes more than X miles from the roadway if you want. So if you're thinking about being able to look at some of the crashes that are on they're near an intersection with a major highway, but on the local road. So say, for example, I want to look at 12 and, or say like 14 and Highway 92. I want to maybe look just a little bit down Highway 92 so I can choose that or exclude crashes that are more than maybe a mile from the roadway or things of that sort. And then I can refine that. So I click add. So you may need to add duplicate road names and numbers and names because they might be in there. So one, there's multiple route names for sections of roadway. So for the belt line here in Madison, it's also known as US Highway 12, US Highway 14, or US Highway 18. So I want to be able to look at all three of those. I-39 could be I-39 or it could be I-90. And then, just as I mentioned before, careful with zeros in the highway names. And then also street names. There can be multiple names for the same street here. So you can see Beltline Highway, that's not spelled right, Beltline Frontage Road South, Beltline Highway spelled right, Beltline HY, Beltline off-ramp. So again, just being able to look at all of those different things. The refine location is one way to look at to kind of narrow down your project. The other option is to use a map and be able to kind of look at it that way, which we'll show an example of here in just a little bit. The other way would be to download all of the crash data for a county or municipality and pull it into Excel and use the filter function within Excel to be able to start to narrow down your choices. The benefit of being able to do that is that you can mark down kind of what your step process is and always go kind of back in time a little bit. Once you refine a location within WisTransPortal, it's hard to go that next step back to say, oh, maybe I didn't want to include that or refine that down a little bit. So, again, there's multiple different ways to do this. A lot of this is still kind of an art form in trying to get down to that data. What you want to be careful of is that you make sure that you try to get all of the data for that area that you want to look at. The Summarize Data tab. To me, this is one of the most underutilized functions of the WisTransPortal Crash Data Retrieval Facility. I think it's one of the easiest ones to use, especially when you're trying to do some quick analysis to be able to say, I want to know how many alcohol fatalities were in my municipality, or I want to know how many injury severities of A there were in a certain area. So I can go ahead and do that all here. So when I click on that summarize data, it initially shows the total number of crashes queried. So because of that previous crash, again, you can see that SQL query right there. So this was from 2015 to 2017 and Muni code 1373. The deer flag is null or yes, and then accident locations either intersection or non-intersection. So there was 16,000 crashes there. I then want to go ahead and start to summarize the data. So the total number of crash data may not be what I'm looking for. So I can then go ahead and use the elements from the pull down menu and then click summarize. So here I wanted to look at person injury severity, so that P there is counting the number of people. So this is helpful to be able to know, especially for our performance metrics. I might want to know the number of serious injuries in a certain area. So here we can see that it was 28 fatalities, not 28 fatal crashes, because that would be a C dot injury severity, which would be counting the number of crashes. The P dot injury severity is counting the number of persons. So 28 fatalities, 248 suspected serious injuries, 2,035 suspected minor injuries, and then so on and so forth. I can then also add, if I want to look at the sex of the occupants in there, or the sex of the people involved here. And if I wanted to pivot, I could break it down that way. So you can see that out of those fatalities, 11 of them were female and 17 of them were male. And so again, I can break it up into that categories. And so sometimes this is helpful for better data visualization. I can either copy this right as is and put it into an email or a data request, or I can download this as a CSV and make a graph out of it, or kind of anything that I want to look at. So again, just to kind of go back to this, the prefix of that P, different segments of the crash report form count different things. So the C is going to count the crash data at the crash level. The V is going to count the vehicle at the vehicle level, and then P is going to count at the person level. When you're looking at the flag, so because we have the person level here, the flag is at, it's at the crash level for the flag. So it's not necessarily saying that the 2 females that were fatally injured were suspected of alcohol use. It just meant that what this means is that 2 females who were fatally injured were in a crash that had suspected alcohol use. So it may or may not be them. But so the flag is at the crash level, where everything else is kind of at the person or the vehicle or the crash level side of things a little bit. When in doubt, always feel free to ask questions to the Wisconsin Department of Transportation, the safety engineer, or ourselves over at the Traffic Operations and Safety Laboratory. Showing the map. So in 2019, we redid the crash mapping. So this is what it looks like now. So this is the CMAA map. What you can see here is a red map. You can see the injury severity levels on the left-hand side. It shows you the severity, the number that were queried, and the number that were mapped. So again, while right now we're at 98% on average statewide that are mapped, maybe not all of them are mapped there. So you can see that all the fatals crashes were mapped, but only 82 out of 88 of the suspected serious injury crashes were mapped. I have the ability to then click on the include unmapped crashes as well too. So if I wanted to look at those to see if those were in my area that I'm concerned about by reviewing the crash report form, I can. The crashes that are being mapped are the coordinates are coming from the crash report form itself. So what law enforcement is putting down at the scene through the tracks location tool is what is being mapped here. While we know that there are multiple crashes that can happen in a location, when you're looking at these clusters, the most severe crash will appear on the top of the cluster. So if it is a location that's had 2 property damage only crashes, a suspected minor injury crash, and a fatality, it'll show the red on top there. So you need to be able to kind of think about that's going to show the most severe crashes on top of the cluster. We'll go through here. So you can see here on the mapping side of it, here's that legend of information. So the total crash is queried, the total crash is mapped. If we show a selection, which I'll show you here in a little bit, it'll show you the crashes that were selected. And I can save that image, I can include the unmapped, and I also have the option to download that selected crash data. I can choose the base map, so I can look at it at a street level, an imagery, topographic, terrain, open street map. So you can kind of do a lot of different choices in how you're looking at that mapped, as well as then looking at all of the unmapped crashes. So I can download those and I can decide if they should be included in my analysis or not, based on reviewing the narrative and the diagram and the narrative of that crash report form. Remembering that a crash can be unmapped if an officer overrides the tracks location tool. So we have a couple different things on the sidebar there. So there's a zoom to the initial extent. So it shows all the queried crashes on a map. So if you were statewide, it might zoom down into it to be able to look at those areas a little bit more. This kind of green button here, which is helpful, it'll toggle between the layers. So it'll show you clusters or points. So the clusters are kind of just those regular dots. If you wanted to kind of do a larger outset, it will go ahead and not do it by crash severity, but it will show you the number of crashes in that area. So this is helpful if you want to look at things really quickly. You can toggle between it and show where there's some of the hot spots in those areas. So it kind of shows up on an intersection or a segment of roadway. I can clear the selection. The selection modes. So you can do a couple different things here. You can do a new selection. Maybe I want to, after I do that new selection, maybe I want to add to it. So I want to add a new set to the selection. Maybe I want to do a smaller subset of a larger selection, or I can remove sections if I want to a little bit. So again, depending on how you want to look at this, are you looking at it on a corridor basis? Are you looking at two different cities? And again, we'll go through some examples here. So I can select the crashes on the isthmus by doing a rectangle there. I can then also add the crashes on the southwest side of Madison that way, so then I can download this and look at this. So maybe I'm looking for a bus route, or I'm looking for different types of characteristics. I might want to do different locations in a city or a county. If I then wanted to only look at the Capitol Square, I can do select a subset of that by just selecting that Capitol Square. So again, I can look at different options here. And then also I can remove sections based on it, depending on what I want to do. I can select by a rectangle of crashes, by a box. So just by dragging and then making that box as large as I want it to be. I can select by a line, so I can select crashes along a line. So I can just keep clicking down and then following that roadway down if I want to be able to look at it that way. I can also select by a polygon. So maybe if you're wanting to look at it based on municipality level or things of that sort, I can select by a polygon to be able to look at it. I can also measure distances from a certain location using that little ruler tool. So selecting by a polygon here, you'll see that it's not just a rectangle or a line. It looks a little bit like a Pac-Man coming to eat the rest of that Milwaukee area. I can download right from the query results page that we mentioned before. This will download the data set based on the query. If I download from the crash mapping page, it's only going to download the data set based on the selected crashes. All downloads will come through with this name, crash-data-download.csv. If I'm downloading more and I'm not changing the name, it'll come through with a 1, 2, 3 after that download component to it. I recommend that you download it and then you save it as whatever file name you recommend. And if you're doing multiple queries and you want to put them in the same Excel document, you can go ahead and put them in there and put them as different tabs as well too. As I download it and open it up into Excel or your favorite spreadsheet, you can go ahead and look at it like this. Each column represents a data element from the crash report, so the same thing that we saw before. I can then also filter it and look at it that way. So I can filter on that first one, and again, that's how I can go through and sort or select based on it. And then what's nice is if you have another tab, you can kind of keep track of, okay, I started out with 1,000 crashes. I then filtered for only the crashes in the Madison area, and that brought me down to 980 crashes. And then I filtered for only the crashes on University Avenue, which brought me down to 100 crashes. So you can kind of keep track of that. And where that's helpful, that is if someone else kind of wants to look at your safety study, you can hand them that Excel file and they can go ahead and not only see the SQL query that you did to get the original data set, but they can also see each step that you took in filtering that data. Once I filtered it, I can refine the crashes similar to the query function. So you can do statewide, county, municipality, and can easily clear the filters or reset the queries. So here, all fatal alcohol crashes on I-39. I can download the statewide data set. I can click on highway, select 39, click on injury severity of K, find the alcohol flag and select Y. And then we can see that there's only 3 crashes that have happened there. So you can see here when you filter it, if you're not familiar with Excel, all the data is still there, but you can see that it's the blue row numbers there. So 10 10,518, 18,853, and 47,896. Those are the three that met my filtering capabilities. And then I can find the document number of the crash, the date, municipality. I can then pull out this document number, retrieve the crash report form if I wanted to look at it and see if there's anything else going on that I should be aware of. To search for intersection crashes, so the example of 25th and Canal in Milwaukee, I can download the information for Milwaukee, and I can filter it by Milwaukee municipality. I can select combinations of 25th and Canal Street from the on street. So we looked at here N 25th Street, N 25th Street 1, and West Canal Street. And then I can further filter down by any at street information so I can look at it that way. So you kind of can go back and forth a little bit. So this is another example of how you can refine a location, not just within the crash data retrieval facility, but also within Excel. So discrepancies in crash data. What can happen and what can go wrong? What are some things that you should be thinking about? So for the tabular summary, it does a great job of providing a quick synopsis of the crashes. There could be some potential for errors because it only shows the first two vehicles and the first two people involved in that crash. Because it's just the crash data, sometimes it's less ability to detect the errors. So there's no diagram or written description in that kind of that CSV one row, one crash file folder a little bit. A detailed assessment requires a review of the actual police reports. Some things to kind of be cautious about a little bit, and we've mentioned it in some earlier sections. Be cautious with the data. There is an underreporting of crashes. We've estimated by looking at some of the maintenance logs that only about 50% of injury and property damage crashes are reported to law enforcement. We looked at the property damage tags that were out there, and we were not able to find the corresponding reports. You also want to be cautious with identifying the actual crash cause. So making sure that you're looking at kind of that full picture of what's going on there. It probably wasn't just one thing, but a multitude of things that caused that crash. There can be opportunities for error in the location. So sometimes there might be directional errors, north, south, east, west, that might get a little bit confused. Intersection and non-intersection. Sometimes the queue length can play into it. So what I usually do is I start with that larger one row, one crash information. I get down to kind of what the ones I think are, the largest amount of our sample study that I want to look at. And then I go through and I actually pull the crash report forms and I review the diagrams, the narratives, and what's on that crash report form. There could be errors in all three. So there might not always be congruency between the at street, what's shown in the diagram, and what's described in the narrative. If that's the case, I look for 2 out of the 3. And if that's not the case, I kind of always go back to the narrative. What does the narrative say? So that's where it says comparing the diagram to the data in the police report, as well as reviewing the written description. Another thing that the crash data retrieval facility has is an advanced query tool. The advanced query tool is helpful in creating more advanced queries. It includes the 7 normal query elements, as well as kind of the ability to allow for more customized queries. So there's an advanced query block that I can get that information in. It also allows me to save queries. So for example, the advanced query block of 8, I may want to look at weather conditions of snow and sleet and hail, and then I can also add more data elements. I can also do the operators as well with that. So the union queries when any conditions are met. So again, this is more of that or statement. The intersect only queries when all conditions are met. So this is similar to our and operator before. Or the minus, which is all results except that second condition. So I might want to say, I want to look at all crashes minus all of the ones that were with driver 16. So maybe I want to pull out some of those crashes. I can go ahead and do that. So this is an example of a snow ice crash where restraints not used. So I can say I want to look at anything that had a weather condition of snow, sleet, or hail. And then I want to look where also, so it says the set operator to combine query blocks is an intersect. So it intersects that also as a non-used of the vehicle occupant. So that's how I get to that snow ice conditions where restraints not being used. I can save those queries. So if I want to look at that, so this is helpful if I want to go back and look at it over time. You can also see some predefined advanced queries that have already been created. So run off the road crashes, snowplow and versus ATV, and others.